Good afternoon and welcome to Round the Table. I'm Ben John from Christian Concern. I'm delighted to be back for another episode of Round the Table. Delighted to be joined by my colleagues Andrea Williams, Chief Executive of Christian Concern, and Roger Kiska of the Christian Legal Centre. Hello, Andrea. Hello, Roger.
Good afternoon, Ben.
Hello.
Hello. Do make sure you put in your comments and your questions. It's always great to hear from you, hear your questions, your concerns, your comments as we wrestle with some of the issues that have been coming up and in the culture and in society today, and how we can be responding as Christians. Andrea, there's been a dramatic story just this week. Tell us what has happened.
Well, the case that you're referring to, Ben, is this amazing good news story which emerges out of Bristol this week, where a little baby boy, just 1 month old, born with a congenital heart condition, was able to be airlifted to the hospital Baby Gesù in Rome, and there he was sent in order to have some life-saving treatment. The Prime Minister of Italy, Giorgia Meloni, got involved, and also the wonderful, brave, courageous advocate Simone Pillon, who was previously a member of the Italian Senate. Together, they were able to ensure that a military ambulance was sent across to Bristol so that this little baby boy could be transformed. And I want to say that that is just amazing good news against the backdrop of many of the end-of-life baby cases that we have had. And of course, as Dean Gregory, baby Indy Gregory's father, said to me, this is bittersweet, because indeed, going back to the autumn of 2023, Senator Pillon, the very same advocate, the Prime Minister Giorgia Meloni, had wanted to offer the very same possibility to baby Indy Gregory, so that she would have had the heart-saving treatment that would have helped her to continue to live. And so that's heartbreaking. But my encouragement to Dean was that Dean and Claire, because you stood, and together we stood with you, because you stood, it was clear that there was this possibility of life and hope. And amazingly, when the medics and the hospital trust in Bristol was preparing, we believe, to go to court, when this plan was presented, they desisted so that this little baby boy could be taken to Italy. There was then cooperation between the hospital and Italy to ensure that this baby was taken there.
Wonderful. And I think we actually have a photo or two of that, of the transfer over, if that could be put up. And I think really, as you said, Andrea, it is a real miracle that this was able to happen, that no, my apologies, there isn't a photo. And it is really a miracle that this was able to happen. There is the baby there, and there's so then an ambulance actually put into a military air carrier to transfer the baby, which really is absolutely amazing. I gather that the doctors almost couldn't believe it themselves in Bristol and were out to look at what was happening. So the whole ambulance there put into the plane and able to take off.
Well, see, this is actually a vindication in many ways of what we have been doing at the Christian Legal Centre over many years. At many points, we have been vilified for seeking to give these very sick little babies help at the end of life, where hospitals in other jurisdictions, we've had jurisdictions in Canada, America, France, and Italy offer to help. These offers of help have been for real. And we can go right back to the case of Alfie Evans. I think that's around five 5 years or so ago now, we can go right back to those cases where in the courts the doctors were arguing that it's in the best interests of Alfie to die. It's in the best interests of Archie Battersby to die. It's in the best interests of Indy Gregory to die. It's in the best interest of Sadiqa to die. It's in the best interests of Charlie Gard to die. When in fact, in every single one of these cases, the parents had secured, with no cost to the taxpayer, with no cost to the hospital, they had secured offers of help from other jurisdictions. They were not in denial about how unwell their children were, but they wanted to give their child every chance to live. And in the immortal words of the amazing 19-year-old Sadiqa, I want to die trying to live. I want to exhaust every possible opportunity. This is what we have been saying to the courts over 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, a long time. And here we didn't go to the courts because there was no need to go to the courts because the plan was there and the doctors yielded to the plan. They said we're unable to do the life-saving treatment. When we said we can do, or when offers of help came in from Italy to say we can do this, then it occurred. And I think that all the kind of descriptions that are put up in court against these families, against the fear-mongering, the scaremongering that goes on, the hyperbole that goes on around these cases, the police guard that gets put up against these families in the hospital rooms in order to prevent them from removing the children. Not that they could remove the children without the proper medical help, but actually there has been a look. I mean, again, we've shown, haven't we, extensive footage, but we've shown the footage of, in the Abbasi case, of 2 medical doctors as parents being pulled from the bedside of their child when they were told that the treatment was going to be withdrawn, and being thwarted from accessing the kind of help that we have seen that can happen in this latest case from Bristol. But I want to commend the amazing Christian Legal Centre and Christian Concern team. And Roger's very much part of that Christian Legal Centre team, together particularly with Michael Phillips, Bruno Quintavalli, instructed as counsel, Pavel Stroilov, this wider team that the Christian Legal Centre has instructed to do extraordinary and amazing and courageous advocacy, and to see now how the culture can turn, and we can, as Senator Pillon and Georgia Maloney say, we're in the business of saving lives. We're in the business of protecting lives. The culture can change. So we should all be very thankful for this. Sad for what it has, the really sad stories that we have been enduring and continue to endure. And indeed, next week, we have the case of Sadiqa in court. Last week, we were in the Supreme Court on the cases of Isaiah Hastrap and the Abbasis, where there's been no transparency in the courts. This coming week, we're going to be arguing around Sadiqa's mental capacity. Can you believe it, that judges and doctors said that this incredibly bright and beautiful 19-year-old girl with a full set of GCSEs to her name, who'd been doing well on experimental treatment prior to COVID, they said that she was deluded, that she didn't have mental capacity. Well, we're going to the courts on when a person has capacity this coming week on Wednesday and Thursday. Roger?
I mean,
I think you probably have much to say on this. I know that you've been very much working alongside me on these cases over many years.
Yeah, I mean, certainly we've had some of our core legal team who've been arguing these cases and on the front lines. I've taken a kind of a lateral role.
Have we lost Roger? No.
You can hear me or no?
Yeah, can hear you, Roger.
Okay. Yeah, no, I've taken somewhat of a lateral role in some of these issues, dealing with the governments on a diplomatic level, trying to get the children transferred to different hospitals. That included Alfie and Indy, and it's amazing how much other countries want to help. And when they put fresh eyes on these medical records, they see something totally different. And just to highlight what Andrea was saying, in the Alfie Evans case where we got so much criticism, if you read that initial judgment and what these experts were saying, that Alfie couldn't survive 3 minutes, or less off of the ventilator. That's what they all said, dire, impossible. He survived almost 24 hours. So what you have with these cases is you have the hospitals having the opportunity to get their experts and everything in line before these cases are filed. The parents come in without this legal knowledge into a highly secretive system. The facts are decided at those initial hearings, and then they're almost set in stone. So it's an unworkable system for these families. And to juxtapose it against something a little different, and that's the abortion issue, and all of the millions of children who are dying unwanted. I mean, goodness gracious, you have a 1-year-old baby on an ambulance, on an airplane, an entire nation celebrating national news over the life of one child. I wish we had that culture of life for every single child out there. But on this issue of end-of-life cases, we need to change. It's heartbreaking how all of this is done in the dark. The parents are not given an opportunity to make their cases public, to have their children known, to know the circumstances surrounding everything. And that's why that Supreme Court case that was heard last week is so important. This idea on mental capacity, that if you can't accept that you're gonna die the way the doctor said that you're gonna die, that you don't have capacity. I mean, if that was the standard, cancer patients around the world would be dying en masse without getting, experimental treatments and such. And so we need to change, really, as a nation. We need to change.
Roger, do you think that with this particular case, and we're thankful for the publicity that it's getting, that this could lead to a shift in the culture? As we've been saying, the case of Indy Gregory not being allowed to go, do you think this could be a turning point?
Well, optics are powerful. Pictures, videos, they speak to the hearts and minds of the nation, and to see how one nation celebrated and the efforts they went to save one child versus what we're doing here, I think that will certainly heap some shame onto the decision makers at the NHS, and hopefully it'll put Parliament in gear to change some of this stuff and legislate safeguards to protect kids from this type of ending.
Yeah. Well, thank you, Roger. It's good to see some of these comments coming in. ED, thank you for your encouragement. God bless you guys at Christian Concern. And yeah, definitely, I echo Andrew's comments about the lawyers at Christian Legal Centre and the amazing work that they're doing. Carol Donaldson, I completely agree. The government now takes God's place and decides how and when we die. Canada and anyone. So absolutely. And I think that's, you're completely right. We need to resist these efforts, resist this justice done in the dark or injustice done in the dark. And we need to be promoting a culture of life that celebrates the efforts that Italy, the Bambino Gesù hospital is going to protect this child. Why are we not doing
that? You went Spanish there rather than Italian, saying Gesù.
Andrea, you know way much better than me. How is it? Bambino?
Gesù.
Gesù, of course. We want a culture of life, and sadly, there are increased efforts to just have a culture of death. And I guess this links in with what's happening on Monday with this upcoming Westminster Hall debate on assisted suicide and euthanasia. We expect it will probably be an opportunity where many MPs will talk about why everyone needs the right to die if they're terminally ill, or if everyone thinks that a free society is to kill those who are suffering. This debate on Monday is an opportunity for us as Christians to make our voices known in speaking about a culture of life. If in countries around the world where euthanasia and assisted suicide has been brought in, we've seen the way in which the culture has, the bounds of which they originally set it, have continued to shift and shift and shift. A lot of the narrative now is about pain and suffering at the end of life. So assisted suicide or euthanasia only for those who are terminally ill with only 3 months left to live. But we know, as we've just been talking about, that oftentimes prognoses can be wrong. And sadly, what we need to be doing is investing in end-of-life care, palliative care, supporting the elderly, supporting the vulnerable. A statistic in Oregon showed that it was over 50% of those that opted for euthanasia or assisted suicide felt like they were a burden to their family or to society. And Matthew Parris, in fact, wrote recently, the former MP, co-founder of Stonewall, said, "Why is that a problem? If they're a burden, they should just die." We really need to make our voices known. We can't allow doctors and our hospitals to become places where we kill people. Of course, that already happens. We already have 200,000 murders every year in abortion, but we cannot extend that to the elderly and to the vulnerable. In Belgium and the Netherlands, they now allow euthanasia, assisted suicide for those who have mental health problems. I hear a lot about how we need to stand with those who are suffering physically, mentally, people are arguing now, instead of standing with them, we should kill them. So on Monday, we're inviting, in fact, you, and I'll be there outside Westminster, standing for life with friends of Christian Concern, not dead yet, those who are disability advocates saying, please don't kill us. Please don't turn doctors into killers. We've been talking about this case of this young boy transferred to Italy, with a hospital going out of their way, not worrying about the cost, to stand and try and help and to heal. Are we going to do that in our society? Are we going to be a culture that says, yeah, even those who are suffering, even those who are in pain, we're going to walk alongside you? People often say, well, we put dogs down to end their suffering. Why can't we do that for humans? And to which I think we need to say, humans are not dogs. We're beautifully, wonderfully made in the image of God. We have value. There is a different sanctity to human life than there is to animals and to dogs. And this is a real opportunity for us to stand and proclaim the truth and the hope of life. So do register. The details for how you can join for the rally are there in the link in the comments. I would invite you to join and stand with us as we proclaim a culture of life and not a culture of death. Andrea, what do you think about how we can be responding, or maybe even Roger, how do you think we can be speaking or responding about euthanasia and assisted suicide?
I mean, the obvious one is write your local member of parliament, because they do listen. This is such an important issue. I mean, a number of times Parliament has already voted down euthanasia, but they keep on trying, and that sadly is a strategy that in other jurisdictions has worked. The more you try, eventually you get there, and so we always have to be vigilant to protect life. I saw someone mention Canada in one of the comments. I am from Canada originally. I have a cough right now. I'm not visiting Canada because they put everyone down for any reason. But really, I mean, you call the hotline there in Canada, and if you're depressed, if you have money problems, the first thing they ask you, if you're a vet who's seeking, better hospitalization conditions, they ask you, do you want to be put to death, assisted suicide? And that is such a shocking culture of death. And we don't want that in the United Kingdom.
It's called medical assistance in dying it.
Yeah. I mean, and what we see in places like Switzerland, where once it was put in, over the course of 2 years, there was a 500% increase in people dying, and that was just from the Swiss. There was assisted suicide travelers who come for the express purpose of dying, and it's unregulated. It's doctors who really want to end your life will, it's kind of like with the abortion consent forms. It's kind of an illusory process where you can pre-sign forms, and with that lack of regulation, it's just gone awry, and we can't allow this in the United Kingdom.
Great comment here coming in from Heather Scammell. Fear of the process of dying is powerful, but how many times have Christians prayed that loved ones will encounter the living Lord in their final hours? Is this really a satanic attack to stop this? Is it? Yeah, it's interesting, isn't it? We often say assisted suicide or euthanasia is helping people, is ending suffering. And actually, sadly, in many cases, or most cases, it's actually it's ending a temporal suffering, but bringing and starting an eternal suffering. How many
well,
people?
I think what we've got on Monday are people coming to Parliament, and I don't know if this has yet been mentioned here, but we've got people coming to Parliament who, many of whom will say that as a result of their disability, they would have chosen suicide at points in their life, but they're coming to Parliament. They're going to rally at 3:00 on Monday, when there's going to be a debate on assisted suicide in the afternoon, but they're rallying at 3:00 before that debate to say, had this been law, had euthanasia or assisted suicide been law, then I would not be here today. And let me say, I know many of those people, and I together with them have been resisting assisted suicide and euthanasia now for 20 years. In fact, over 20 years in this country. And it's amazing to see those people getting older along with me and living, choosing to live. And, you know, they're very powerfully, Merv and Nikki Kenwood will also be coming to Parliament. They're going to be in Parliament at 11:00. They're artists, and they are really going to be saying to the watching world, don't kill people like Nikki. Nikki's going to say that. Nikki's an artist. She's going to say, do not kill people like me, because the truth is, when I was locked in and was trying to communicate that I didn't want to live, I feared that I would die. And, you know, this is what we need to be careful of. And Roger's absolutely right. You know, I have great fear in this country that with bills in the Isle of Man, with bills in Jersey, with a massive push going on right now in Scotland, if one of those jurisdictions yields, then the pressure will be enormous for other parts of the United Kingdom to follow. So this must be resisted in every one of those jurisdictions as potently as possible. But I'm asking everyone that's listening, I'm asking you to come and rally with us at 3:00 on Monday. And if you'd like to be part of the bigger picture on this, then do contact us this afternoon at the Christian Concern office, because we would love to hear from you. I know this goes out beyond the Friday lunchtime when we're filming, which is on the 26th of April, ahead of the rally this coming Monday. But do get in touch with us about details around that, and they will also be on our website.
Yeah, it would be great to have as many as possible come to make our voices heard. I think sadly, far too often, the media positions and centers the celebrities and Esther Ranson and all the politicians who are coming out in support. Sir Keir Starmer, leader of the Labour Party, has affirmed his support for a change in the law only in the last few months, or made it more explicit, at least, in the last few months. And so it's important that we make our voices known and heard.
And in fact, that's actually, Ben, a reason why we need to be holding our candidates coming up for election in the coming year to account. There is a reality that Keir Starmer was a director of public prosecutions and was instrumental in weakening the law around prosecutions of assisted suicide, and his successor. And indeed, it was Merv and Nikki Kenwood who brought a case to challenge the weakening of guidelines around those that help people to assist in suicide. And this was around 20, sometimes like the years begin to merge, but around 2014, 2015. But Sir Keir Starmer was in fact the director of public prosecutions around that time. So we know the measure of the man on this particular issue. And so when it comes to us giving our votes to candidates, we need to ask them explicitly, will you stand against assisted suicide? Will you stand for the protection of life at the beginning of life? And will you stand against assisted suicide? This needs to be a plank of the Christian vote coming out en masse, where we say we cannot give you a vote to those that are against the protection of life, whatever party they are in. And of course, I always have to say that let's remember that it's under a conservative regime that we have seen some of the most appalling laws passed. And so that's also our reality. But it may well get darker under Labour, but that the Conservatives shouldn't be taking for granted the Christian vote when they've allowed so much to take place. And I don't think we should give it to them where they have not protected life. And we need some explicit promises to say that they will.
No, absolutely, Andrea. No, thank you. And certainly we'll be in the next few months engaging more as we speak about how we as Christians can have a prophetic voice in this upcoming general election. This month, earlier this month, the Scottish hate crime bill came into response. Roger, tell us what you think of the Scottish hate crime bill.
Well, I mean, the long form of the bill is the Hate Crime and Public Order Scotland Act 2021. It gained royal assent on the 23rd of April 2021. It took 3 years to become law. And one of the reasons for that is just how awful of a bill it is. And just to compare it to England and Wales's signature hate speech bill, which is the Public Order Act 1986, I mean, there's stark differences. So, for example, in England, we have represented and supported any number of street preachers who have been arrested or there's been attempts to prosecute under Section 5 of the Public Order Act, which prohibits abusive and threatening language or behavior. All but one street preacher we have ever, and there's been a lot of them that we've ever supported, has been acquitted or they've not even gone to court because the evidence was so weak. So it's not like the Public Order Act in England is particularly good. The maximum fine you can get for a Section 5 offense in England is £1,000, no jail time. So what they've done, however, in Scotland is they've taken the term abusive, which you find in the Public Order Act in England, which is just a monetary fine, a relatively minor one, and they've made that a jailable fine. And they've expanded the number of protected characteristics. So in England, whereas it's considered religious hatred to incite with threatening language, not with abusive language, but just with threatening language or behavior on the basis of sexual orientation or religion. And there's some great defenses to that. In Scotland, the term abusive is added, and there's a minimum, not a minimum, there's a 12-month sentence attached to it. If you plead guilty. If you don't plead guilty and there's a trial, you can go to jail for 7 years just for using abusive language. The categories they've used in Scotland are remarkable as well. So one is transgender identity. They've created a whole new category for transgender identity. So in all of the UK, the definition for transgender identity is linked to the Gender Recognition Act. You need a gender recognition certificate, except when it comes to discrimination and harassment, where you have to still have the protected characteristic of gender reassignment. Well, in Scotland, they've thrown that out the window, and they've said, look, if you're a cross-dresser, if you're non-binary, these things that have no parallel in the law anywhere else in the UK, that is transgender identity. And if you insult, abuse folks on that basis, or for being intersex, you can go to jail for 12 months. If you push it out on social media, if you send some abusive meme or something dealing with, let's say, for example, drag queen story hour, and a court and a prosecutor find that is abusive and that it's stirring up hate, you could go to jail just for pushing that out on your social media. So it's an awful law. It's a dangerous law. It crosses jurisdiction. So, for example, if Christian Legal Center put together a memo criticizing something that someone in Scotland felt was incitement to religious hatred or hatred on the basis of sexual orientation, and we asked one of our supporter organizations in Scotland to push that out to their supporters, we would also be put before the courts criminally for a potential jail sentence. That would be Andrea as the manager and the CEO, the executive team. It's unbelievable how broad and dangerous this law
I mean,
is.
and the truth is as well, it's not when the use of abusive is that people say it's abusive, and that it's kind of hate language, when in fact it's usually love language, because it's speaking a truth language. So it's how people receive that if they say I am insulted, this is abusive language against who I am, that is then deemed to be a hate crime, or potentially a hate crime.
Yeah,
So
these words like hatred, abuse, they become so subjective and so loose. We use the word hate for anything we disagree with now. So now we're going to be prosecuting abuse and hate, with jail time. It's scary Orwellian stuff.
I mean,
happening in
the
Scotland.
truth is where things are truly where things are truly abusive, where things are truly amount to harassment, the criminal law already has proper protections and tests to ensure that they are met. That's sane law. What we have here, and this is very often what happens when a nation and when those that are the lawmakers lose a clear moral and philosophical and religious compass. And in essence, this all boils back, as I often say, but it boils back to really rejecting a biblical worldview that understands the innate dignity and freedom of every individual person, and legislating within that context. When you legislate within a context of increasing competitive rights culture that demands and says unless there is acceptance, it is hate and discriminatory, you end up with a law like this one, which will jail, as Roger says, the Christian person that speaks out in love on moral issues and on human identity.
I'll just say this. Sorry. Just to add to how bad this is, none of the street preachers that we've supported, and again, there's a huge number of them, were ever charged with under the Religion Hatred Act, which uses just the word threatening, because the courts knew that the prosecutors knew the threshold was too high. So they charged under the lower offense, which is the Section 5 offense, which includes abusive language. The fact that Scotland is now including that in their basically their hate crime act is shocking, absolutely shocking.
Good to see some of these comments coming in. Thank you for your comments. Heather Scammell with a question here. So any criticism can be interpreted as hate, and Christians are supposed to, I'm not sure if this is a rhetorical question but Christians are supposed to turn the other cheek and never stand up for God's truth. I think that's the thing. Christians do need to have a voice, and I think, turning the other cheek is referring to kind of personal retaliation in terms of, whatever that might mean. But I don't think it means we don't speak the truth. And sadly, the Scottish government is saying, no, Christians, you cannot speak the truth because that's hateful.
Just to be clear, you are allowed to criticize or discuss sexual orientation, transgender identity. So that's permissible under freedom of speech, because Scotland still is required to follow Article 10 of the European Convention, which is freedom of expression. But if you abuse by using aggressively insulting language, for example, or ridicule, or you show antipathy, then that is considered.
What is that?
There is such a fine subjective line.
The point is, they say, I've been on a radio show or a podcast just like this, and for quoting scripture, for speaking God's truth, that is deemed to be abuse. I've been accused of triggering and being hateful, simply, possibly, sometimes, as we know, Christians can be accused of being responsible for people's suicides because they we know there's no basis of this in any social science study that's been done, of course not, but for simply speaking Christian truth on the biblical sexual ethic. And that the place that we've got to, you're right, even with the Article 10 freedom of expression protection, and we thank God for that. We thank God for sane law and actually a long history of precedent setting in this country, rooted ultimately in biblical law, ultimately in biblical worldview in terms of framing the law. We thank God for that. But the truth is today that the very speaking and living out and manifesting Christian faith can be deemed abusive and harassing. And that really is why, that's why we have to defend this matter and keep on educating and explaining to people why these speaking of words come from truth speech, not hate speech.
That's precisely right. I was just using the words of the statute, but
yes,
if you are a judge sitting in a court or a prosecutor, what's the difference between criticism of homosexual behavior and insult or showing of antipathy? It's in the eye of the beholder. It's so loosey-goosey. Yeah.
That's it, Roger. That's exactly it. And I think the thing that I find troubling is that when we're in the courtrooms, everyone from the usher to the judge or from the lay justices, almost everyone thinks they know what a Christian is, but doesn't really know what a Christian is, doesn't really know what the Bible says, and thinks that to disagree with homosexuality, the practice of homosexuality, is to be homophobic, and these words or transphobic and so on and so forth. And there's a massive education exercise that needs to go on, because everyone thinks that the practice of homosexuality is an intrinsic identity. All of these things are muddled in the legal and public space. And I think sometimes when we as Christians, we understand things very clearly. We do understand things very clearly from a biblical perspective and understand the faults in the law. But many of these differentials that Roger's been talking about, even talking about this precise language of the statute being abusive, for instance, people just think disagreeing with the practice of homosexuality is abusive. It's full stop. Because in essence, it's racist. It's because it's like saying some hate words against a person because of the color of their skin. And these differentials, the world out there generally is not understanding, no matter how hard we try to explain the differentials. And so when someone says, when they're speaking to me like that, that's hate speech, and I'm receiving it as threatening and abusive and harmful and triggering, no one can really understand why they aren't right. I mean, I don't know how you want to, I don't know if you have any response to that, Roger or Ben.
I would say I sat in open court and seen witnesses, educated people, leaders of schools, who have said that Christian doctrine, when it's been put to them in cross-examination, that is homophobic, knowing full well that it's Christian doctrine or something from the Bible or a belief in Christian marriage, that those are homophobic. So if these incredibly educated people don't know, it lights a fire under me as a Christian, and it should under all of us to evangelize on these issues and speak about them in church and speak about them to our neighbors, because we're losing the culture war if those decision makers don't know the difference.
And they don't. They
Christian
really
belief in homophobia. Yeah.
They really don't.
We need to step up our game. Yeah.
We do. I mean, sorry to interrupt, Roger, but there, like 2 weeks ago, was it 2 weeks ago, in the case of Felix and Gole, one of the witnesses, who was a manager in the Touchstone agency, he said John 3:16. He literally said that John 3:16, probably the most famous verse in the Bible, for God so loved the world that he sent his only begotten son, that whomsoever believeth on him should not perish but have eternal life, that verse was triggering. So
the Pharisees.
Yeah.
I guess we're living in a challenging time where there's ignorance, there's hatred of God. I guess we're living in an age where God's handing people over to their desires, and as I often say, we're asking for a society without God, and God in one sense is letting us have it, but there is hope. People are coming to Christ. Christian Concern is having an impact. We're seeing victories, we're seeing progress being made, and so all of that is not without hope. And I think I've been seeing Mum of Many for the glory of God, putting a lot of Bible verses here in the comments. She wrote, imagine how powerful it would be if our nation would practice 2 Chronicles 7. Relying on government is not it. Rely on the heavenly government of Christian spiritual warfare is real, and we need to engage. And so certainly we need to be engaging in prayer, we need to be engaging in spiritual warfare, and we need to be making our voices known with the tools that are available to us, not putting our hopes in that, not putting our hopes in the government, not putting our hopes in things, but knowing that these are tools that God has given us to engage in order to care for our neighbor, in order to speak the truth in love. And yeah, Roger, your analysis of the Scottish hate crime bill, it's concerning what's going on there in Scotland. It's concerning the powers that they are giving themselves on such ambiguously worded legislation. But it's important then, now more than ever, that Christians do speak, that we don't let fear silence us from speaking the truth, that we don't let fear silence us from calling people out from their sin and to Christ. Otherwise, people will be left trapped. How can we be so worried about temporal things when people are going to hell for their sin? We need to be pointing them to them, contending, speaking. And I guess that's why we do what we do, isn't it, Andrea? That we are proclaiming the Lordship of Christ over all things, over the government, over society, over laws, over media, knowing that He is Lord. He is the one whom all will one day bow, whether willingly or forcefully on that last day. And we pray that even now people would turn to Him, that our governments would turn to Him and proclaim Him as Lord, and so that churches and Christians can continue doing the work of ministry and evangelism and discipleship, caring for those who are broken for as long as possible, for as freely as possible. Thank you, Andrea. Thank you, Roger, for joining. Andrea, did you just want to close us with a final comment?
Oh, well, I think Tartufo's on the comments on the chat is doing that for us very well. Just saying thank you for the encouragement, Tartufo. I appreciate what you do and how you fight for justice, for the truth. And as followers of Jesus Christ, we must preach the gospel. God bless you, brothers and sisters in Jesus Christ. And I think that exhortation should go to all those that are listening in today. Let's continue to love the Lord Jesus. Let's continue to spread His good news to all. And let that be the motivation for everything we do and say every moment of the day. God bless you. Great to be here today.
Thank you, Andrea. Thank you, Roger. And thank you all for tuning in, and see you next week on Round the Table.